Now, I have always been on of the mindset that I really don't mind all these reboots and remakes Hollywood's been kind of dabbling over the last 15 to 20 years. For me, they can remake anything as long as it's good. I'm fine with it. But walking out at a movie like this, it makes me really understand why people hate all these reboots and remakes and all that. I get it. This is exactly why. And with that, I'm welcome you to another episode of The Romancer, where my goal, as always, is to enhance your movie watching experience. So The Hustle here, it is a movie. It's actually a remake of 1988's Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, starring Steve Martin and Michael Caine. And I'm looking at this remake as from perspective of one who actually loved that movie. I Unfortunately, I'm old enough to have been around when that movie came out. I did end up seeing it. I've seen it several times after the fact. It's a very funny movie, great premise. And Michael Caine and Steve Martin are fantastic together. So, when I heard they were remaking this, I was kind of curious. I was hoping they can kind of take a new spin on it. It's a 20, 30-year-old movie, so I want to see what else they can do with it now, setting it up with today's times. And I like the whole idea of this gender switch, because now the Steve Martin and Michael Caine characters are being portrayed by Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson. And those who are unfamiliar with the original movie, there might be a lot of you guys out there. We basically have two con artists. We have Rebel Wilson, who is a small-time con artist. She's very unkept, uncouth. She kind of goes for the small fish. And you have Anne Hathaway, who's definitely more refined. She's obviously lives in the lap of luxury. She goes after the bigger fish, the big marks. And one, they cross paths. And Rebel Wilson tries to learn from Anne Hathaway's character. She wants to be more like her and go after the big money. And eventually they have a fallout and they kind of become adversaries, now engage in a contest to see who can take down a mark for a certain amount of money, and the loser has to leave town. Now, when I go into this, and I love the cast. I love Anne Hathaway. I think she's fantastic. And she has decent comedic chops. She can handle it. Rebel Wilson, I think she's funny and does well from time to time in small spurts. And overall, I gotta say, listen, as a fan of the original movie, if you've seen the original movie, you guys, I can honestly say you should not watch this movie. Now, those who are unfamiliar with the original Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, I can honestly say you shouldn't watch this movie. Now, the biggest problem I have with this film is it's just lazy. It's just absolutely lazy at every turn here. The writing it relies too much on these fat jokes of Rebel Wilson, this kind of slapstick comedy. It doesn't have any of the cleverness that the original movie had. And Rebel Wilson, who I do like, and even Anne Hathaway, and they're okay, they're not bad, they got decent chemistry together. They're probably the best part about the movie is that it's just the direction. Again, they don't have much to work with here. I don't blame them themselves as much as the writing. And this is a first-time director, Chris Addison, and it shows here. His inexperienced shows. Doesn't really let these characters shine through. He rushes through a lot of parts, particularly when it comes to the Mark, this is the individual who both these ladies are going after in a contest. He's not really set up properly in the ending, because there's this movie. It's so lazy that I was hoping this movie would take this premise. It's a great premise, and if you haven't seen Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, if you decide to watch this movie, you're gonna like the premise. It's a good idea. It's a nice, good twist, a good review. In the end, it's just not set up as well as it should have, as it was in the original. And it's hard for me to separate the two, because this is, at the end of the day, a pretty much pretty much a shot-by-shot remake of the original. It's so lazy, it doesn't even want to make any real changes. Yes, it's updated more, uses more some of the technology stuff. I get it. But ultimately, the same scenario is there, the same way how they approach the scenario is the same twist is the same, very minor changes. And some of the scenes that they use are basically, it's exactly the same. It's a copycat replica of the original. It attempted nothing new here, except just kind of remake it with a couple of very talented women here whose talents are wasted and is poorly written, really shoddy directed, and boring, and honestly just an unfunny film. Now, ultimately, I am disappointed because I was expecting more. It's a very talented people here, Wilson and Hathaway, and they're better than this. They really are. And if this movie would have been funny, great. I just didn't laugh. Maybe it's just me, but much of the theater wasn't laughing. There's a couple of scenes I chuckled at. There's one I really liked, which was a take on the scene from the original movie. It was done a little bit differently, but I thought it was funny. But for the most part, the jokes didn't land. Again, too many fat jokes, too much slapstick going around. It's unnecessary. The premise is so clever, they didn't allow that to be at the forefront of what should have been a very funny comedy. If you've seen the original, you know what I'm talking about. Don't bother watching this. This is a poor remake of that. And Steve Martin and Michael Caine are light years better than what Wilson and Hathaway are given to do here, and that's unfortunate. Ultimately, I can't recommend this movie. If you haven't never seen the original, you might get some interesting, maybe some last items because the premise is great. It's just not executed very well. But honestly, I really tell you guys to watch it. Waste your time and go watch it. Those if you're familiar with the original source material, definitely don't watch it. It's gonna disappoint you. It disappointed me. It is what it is. But listen, if you guys watch it, comment, let me know what you guys thought about it. And of course, if you haven't done so already, subscribe below and feed money to go to the movies and talk about it afterwards. See you guys next time.